welcome to Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and this is the third Frank's motion coming from Richard Allen's defense team regarding the case against Richard Allen in the unalivings of Abby and Libby, who are on our thumbnail. Libby is the blonde girl, or blonder girl, on the left. And then Abby she's got the darker hair on the right. All right, so through on my channel, I apologize for the hood, the sweatshirt. It's really cold today. Our temperatures in Chicago have like plummeted. It was like really nice spring, and all of a sudden we're back to winter. Got snow flurries all around us today. Anyways, so this is the third Frank's motion. On my channel, we've read through the entire Frank's motion. It was 136 pages long, so we did it in multiple parts. I believe it was like 8 or something like that. And then I must have known there was a second. Like, I knew there was a second Frank's motion, but I've never read it on this channel. So I will read that at the end of this, just because I want to make sure that, we've gone through all of it. I don't know how much is repetitive or not. We'll kind of find out. So here is Richard Allen's third Frank's notice and request for Frank's hearing based upon newly discovered evidence and request for findings of facts and conclusions of law upon any ruling on this request. And that last part there is so important because Judge Gull has just been ruling and she's not giving her reasons why she's doing anything, and she's just like denied. So they're asking for, give us the conclusion, like give us your ruling, but tell us how you got there. What are the facts that you found to concluded you to, presume no, to answer no to all of our pleadings. All right. So anyways, comes now the accused Richard Allen by and through counsel and files his third Frank's notice and request for Frank's hearing based upon newly discovered evidence. In support of said motion, the accused states the following. Number 1, on September 18th, 2023, the defense filed its first Frank's notice, which consisted of a 136-page memorandum in support detailing 1, certain evidence that Tony Liggett, sheriff now, he was in the middle of a election to become sheriff when there was an arrest made. Anyway, so certain evidence that Tony Liggett failed to include in his search warrant application. 2, certain evidence that was detailed in his search warrant application that was false. And 3, evidence that law enforcement had acted in an unintentional manner on multiple instances, attempting to conceal evidence from the defense and failing to tell the truth under oath concerning certain evidence. So not only are they failing to hand it over, but they're lying. They're not telling you the truth. Judge, court, they're not giving you everything that you need. Number 2, the defense incorporates the contents of its Frank's notice and memorandum into this document. So some of those components are going to be in here. As soon as I start talking, my mouth gets dry. All right, so number 3. On October 3rd, 2023, the defense filed its second Frank's notice detailing how the prosecution and law enforcement had attempted to conceal the identity of a Purdue professor whose testimony contradicted that of law enforcement officers Tony Liggett and Jerry Holman. This notice was provided as a supplement to the first Frank's notice in order to bolster the defense contention that the state of Indiana and law enforcement were acting intentionally and or with reckless disregard of the truth to further support the request for a Frank's hearing. Number 4, the defense incorporates the contents of its second Frank's notice filed on October 3rd, which we'll get into also. So, Number 5, after Franks 1 and 2 were filed just before the defense were kicked off the case in October 2023, the defense received certain geofencing evidence that it did not have an opportunity to fully examine, explore, or discuss with its experts. Okay. 6, just after the defense was reinstated on the case in January 2024, it received certain discovery in the form of a September 22, 2023 report that was authored by Sergeant Jerry Holman, purportedly memorializing an interview that he had with former Purdue professor named Jeffrey Turco. So they finally get the discovery, but not until September 2022 of last year. All right, so number 7, both the geofencing evidence and Holman's September 22 report provide new information that supports the defense request for a Franks hearing. Number 8, specifically, the defense received certain geofencing evidence that at least 3 persons were in or around the crime scene at a time while the murders were taking place, according to law enforcement timelines, and none of the owners of the phones have any connection to Richard Allen. So 3 separate phones were in and around the crime scene. I did a video on the geofencing, which I will link to this video or, in the description below, so that you can look at that. The excuse me, Sleuthy Goosey put together a visual aid that can help show you some of the possible scenarios that happened with the phones based on this geofencing data. All right, so where was I? The geofencing evidence would provide evidence of any of the following scenarios. A, that those persons walking with the phones are witnesses that would have observed the unalivings as they were taking place, and yet none of them have identified Richard Allen. Or 2, this is the second possibility, those persons walking with the phones were witnesses who observed nothing as the unalivings did not take place the afternoon of February 13th, but instead the victims were taken to the crime scene after the search was called off. And that should be 2017, not 2023, but it's just a typo. So either they were, let's read 3. All right, so 3, those persons walking with the phones were the participants of the unaliving. So either A, they were walking around and were witnesses of whoever did it, but nobody's come forth and identified Richard Allen, and 2, or anybody for that matter, and 2, any of the people could be just witnesses, but yet they didn't observe anything because there was nothing that was happening. Perhaps the girls were taken somewhere and then their bodies were staged in the place where we call the crime scene where they were found. So that's another possibility. Or 3, the persons walking with the phones were the actual unalivers. So there's a couple possibilities that it could be, and none of them are Richard Allen. So there you go, because none of them are his phones. So number 10, said geofencing evidence was so important to somebody involved in the investigation that they created a map and plotted the movements of these persons, including movements that show that at least one of those persons was within 60 to 100 yards of the crime scene at a time while the unalivings would have been committed, like right in that same window, according to law enforcement's timeline. So these phones were there from, as the next line, 11 says, the map shows that the other 2 phones and the persons carrying those phones were in and around the crime scene between 12:39 and 5:49 p.m. on the 13th of February that year. So 2 of the phones were within the area between those times, 12:30 and 5:49. And 1 phone was actually within 60 to 100 yards of the crime scene, right directly in that time frame that police are saying is when the unalivings happened, which is between 2:30 and 3:30 p.m. So one of those phones is right around 60 to 100 yards within that. They were able to determine through geofencing that phone was within 60 to 100 yards of where the bodies were found. So there's that. And again, none of these phones are directed or at all related to Richard Allen. They're not his phones. He's not connected to them or any of the people. We don't know whose they are at this point. All right, so number 12, the defense has sought out but has not been provided any documents or reports that contradict or refutes said geofencing evidence, but have not found such evidence, nor has the prosecutor provided any when defense requested reports on said geofencing. So they're not handing over the reports on this geofencing. 13, when Tony Liggett drafted his affidavit for search warrant of Richard Allen's home, he concealed from Judge Diener the fact that at least 3 phones and the people using those phones were moving in and around the crime scene. So he completely left out all this geofencing information, basically, when he was trying to get his search warrant signed by the judge. And we don't need to read that. It's repetitive. All right, so number 14, Tony Liggett should have notified Judge Diener that certain people who are not Richard Allen nor connected to Richard Allen were moving in and around the crime scene at a time when Liggett claims the unalivings were being committed. Right during that time frame, there were 3 phones that aren't Richard Allen's. 15. It is reasonable to conclude that if Tony Liggett had notified Judge Diener that certain people not named Richard Allen nor connected to Richard Allen were moving in and around the crime scene, when Judge Diener would not have signed Judge Diener would not have signed the affidavit, especially based upon the paucity of evidence otherwise contained in the affidavit connecting Richard Allen to the unalivings. So because it's so scarce, like there's not a whole lot of evidence that links Richard Allen to the unalivings, so they had to, maybe hide some things in their investigation. I don't know. But they definitely were hiding things from Judge Diener. All right, so number 16, said geofencing information would have provided evidence to Judge Diener that negated Richard Allen's presence at the crime scene. Liggett should have told Judge Diener that crucial, relevant, and exculpatory information which had been available since 2017, especially when Liggett's affidavit was written in October 2022, over 5 years later. 17. So, yeah. Liggett's affidavit wasn't even... They failed to provide this evidence to the judge, and then his affidavit is over 5 years later. He's still leaving out exculpatory evidence. All right, so number 17. Additionally, Sergeant Jerry Holman's September 22nd memorialization of his interview with Jeffrey Turco once again reveals that he attempted to deceive the reader of said report by leaving out key information and words uttered from the mouth of Turco concerning the likelihood that the sticks left behind were in fact runes, making Odinism's involvement in the unalivings more likely and worth investigating. Holman also failed to recite the full words of Turco concerning the plausibility that those who left the runes behind were involved in some type of human sacrifice. Holman left out some big information that changes the entire scope of what your investigation would be. Completely changes the investigation. All right, so number 18. On September 22nd, Holman wrote a report in which he failed to mention the word rune or any deviation thereof when memorializing the words of Turco. Runes were a big part of Turco's interview. Yet Holman chose to exclude the word rune or any deviation of that word from his report. Instead, the relevant part of Holman's report was the following. So here's directly straight from his report. I asked Turco to summarize his findings, and he said they were inconclusive. In his opinion, he thought the sticks were placed deliberately, but was unsure what they meant. He said that he provided some educational guesses in his report. I asked him if the Odin religion practiced ritualistic human sacrifices, and he said no. He stated that no evidence or research indicates that religion practicing human sacrifices. He told me that if someone Google searched it, they may see that the Vikings were accused of human sacrifices, but he said that there is no proof of it. I asked him if he ever heard of ritualistic human sacrifices around here, and he said no. He told me not even in Norway, where this type of religion is more prevalent, has he heard of any ritualistic human sacrifices. So that is what Holman said that Turco said. 19. What Holman failed to write in his report were Turco's words that more strongly detailed how Odinism was likely involved in the unalivings due to the likelihood that the sticks were formed into a runic shape. Quote, it's a given, and how it was very plausible that human sacrifice could be a component to said unalivings. Number 20, because Holman had sworn under oath in his August 10th, 2023 deposition that the sticks found at the crime scene did not represent Odinism or any type of cult worshipping or any type of a group that would have conducted this crime. End quote. All right, so that was a big, long explanation. It was in Holman's interest to hide the actual words of Professor Turco concerning the likelihood that the sticks were formed as runes are significantly featured in Odinism. So he left out the part that it was runes because runes are a symbol. Odinism uses a lot of symbols, and runes are one of those symbols. Turco's words and information that Holman left out of his report include the following. After viewing the way the sticks at the... So this is Turco's actual words. Sorry, my bangs are driving me nuts today, and it's cold and whatever. Okay. My hair keeps flopping in my face. Turco's words and the information that Holman left out of his report. After viewing the way the sticks at the crime scene were arranged, it was a given that the pattern of sticks was someone's attempt to replicate a Germanic runic script. It's a given, so it's definite. Also, one of Turco's colleagues, a Harvard professor with even more expertise, agreed with these findings. Odinism is an extreme neo-pagan, neo-heathenism ideology that has right-wing racist connotations. Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal were known to be involved in extremist racist groups. So there's that. Although he could not necessarily interpret the intended meaning of these sticks formed into runes, the stick configurations were pretty clearly runic, and that he, quote, could certainly imagine that this was somebody's idea, that when you do human sacrifice, you carve runes. There are some poetic sources that would sort of support the idea that somebody might have come across. That scenario seems entirely plausible to me, end quote. Furthermore, Dr. Turco discussed how runes were thought to have, quote, magical significance and would be used in incantations in rituals, and that there is a sacrificial connection in mythological poetry. According to the police reports, Brad Holder told Amber Holder, so Brad Holder told his wife at the time, I don't know if they're still together, but he told Amber that he and Patrick Westphal had a falling out over something that had happened in the woods near a river during a ritual. So we've talked about that in my channel before, especially in the Frank's memo. It's just very interesting that it's discussed in its entirety in the Frank's memo, how they had a falling out. Or number 22. In other words, here's what Holman did not write in his report. Turco told me that, quote, it was a given that the arrangement of the sticks were part of a runic script. Investigators have learned that runes are a feature of those who practice Odinism, and those who practice Odinism are sometimes aligned with racist or extremist groups. Brad Holder's son had some type of dating relationship with one of the victims, and Brad Holder was an Odinist fascinated with runes, which are found throughout his Facebook page. That's undeniable. It is what it is. People have done, screenshots of his Facebook page, his runes that he tried to replicate that were very similar to the ones at the crime scene. So this is known knowledge now after the Frank's memo that this is what has happened. Allegedly. I mean, nothing is true until it's proven, but especially in a court of law. All right. Also, Turco admitted that it was entirely plausible that somebody would read something on the internet indicating that Viking religions involved human sacrifice, and that same person could have an idea that when conducting a human sacrifice, runes should be carved, and that runes have a magical significance and would be used in rituals. It's very different than what Holman said, he said. Brad Holder told his ex-wife that Brad and Patrick Westphal had a falling out in the woods near a river in February 2017 due to something that happened at a ritual. So there you go. Number 23. Instead of including Turco's words detailed in the previous paragraph, Holman wrote that Turco's findings were, quote, inconclusive, and then failed to even mention the word, quote, rune, even a single solitary time. So the word rune was never mentioned, and he just said the whole thing was inconclusive, even though we just read what he actually said, and that's not what he said. So, all right, so number 24. If you are trying to hide Turco's actual opinion about the linkage between the stick configurations in a runic script and the entirely plausible opinion that human sacrifice could be a component of the unalivings, then you would draft your report as Sergeant Holman did, as quoted from his report in paragraph 18 above. Number 25. If you are trying to provide an accurate accounting of Turco's opinion, then you would write it as in paragraph 22. So if you're trying to hide information, you would go with this first version, which was no evidence and something about the Vikings, but no human sacrifices, nothing to see here. And then you come back to Turco's quote, and it's obvious that it's affiliated with some kind of racist / extremist group. So there's that. All right. Number 26. Due to Sergeant Holman's sworn testimony from his August 10th, 2023 deposition, Sergeant Holman had a lot at stake when he interviewed Turco. Ideally, in order for Holman's sworn August 10th, 2023 testimony to be true, Turco would have told Holman words to the effect of, quote, that configuration is not runic, and therefore that arrangement does not represent Odinism or any type of cult worshipping or any type of group that would have conducted the crime. Unfortunately for Sergeant Holman, Turco did not state those words to that effect. Quite the opposite. Number 27. This explains why Sergeant Holman initially attempted to hide the identity of the Purdue professor, see Frank's 2, we'll get into that shortly after this, and then attempted to conceal Turco's actual words in Holman's September 22nd report that, quote, it was a given that someone was trying to replicate a Germanic runic, say that 10 times fast, replicate a Germanic runic script, and that it was entirely plausible that a person believed that human sacrifices involved the use of runes. In defense counsel's, number 28, in defense counsel's experience, some lawyers simply don't listen to tape recording of an interview, but rather rely on the veracity of police reports that memorialize that interview. Number 29, in this very case, for example, Brad Holder's February 17th, 2017 videotape statement was purportedly erased. Only a short report memorializing that tape interview ever existed. So there's so early on, very early on in the investigation, Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Elvis Fields, they were all considered to be suspects in this crime. And they had some videotaped statement that they did with police shortly after they were shortly after the unalivings happened. And somehow they got recorded over. So their excuse is that the tapes didn't reset or something, and so it recorded over the previous day, so they didn't get to it in time after it happened, so they couldn't save it or something. I don't know, something lame like that. So therefore, the defense is being forced to rely entirely on the words and context the author of that interview chose to include in that report, rather than the entirety of the actual words uttered by Holder. So we have to go by Holman's recollection or Liggett's recollection of how things happened, especially when interviewing a witness. You want a signed statement from that witness. You don't want the police officer writing the statement or writing it, as like, I asked the person, they said this to me. And we're seeing that a lot in these cases, that police officers are not doing a separate interview and they're just reiterating the statement in their own words. But that's not sufficient, in my opinion. All right, so the way that Holman memorialized his interview with Turco, detailed above, should cause alarm about what law enforcement can choose to include or not include in their reports. The tape recording is the best evidence. Yes, of course it is, but how come we don't have it? It's not produced to us, so we can't go by that. We have to trust the word of someone who has an interest in getting someone locked up. So when Brad Holder shared with investigators in his February 17th, 2017 interview, but the authors chose to leave out, even innocently, not knowing what was important at the time, could be exculpatory in nature and lead to exculpatory evidence exonerating Richard Allen. However, at this time, we are expected to simply accept that the words written by the author of Holder's erased interview provide the full gamut of information needed to protect Richard Allen's rights. Again, Holman's memorialization of Turco's words in this case should cause grave concern to this court as it relates to any erased videotape interviews. Agreed. It should be a great concern to the court. 30. If no one listened to Turco's actual words spoken to Holman on that audio tape, then Holman's deceptive memorialized report would leave the reader with an entirely different perspective than what Turco's words actually revealed. Number 31. As it relates to Franks, the defense is required to show that law enforcement acted intentionally when including false information in the affidavit or when omitting important information from the affidavit. So you definitely omitted important information from the affidavit. 32. It would be highly unlikely that Liggett would admit, quote, I intentionally omitted important information from the affidavit, and I also intentionally included false information in the affidavit. Also, I wrote the affidavit with a reckless disregard for the truth. But he should be saying that. Alright, so number 33, if the standard to get to a Frank's hearing is that law enforcement must admit that they acted intentionally or recklessly, then a Frank's hearing is a legal fiction, as no law enforcement officer will make such admissions. Number 34, therefore, the defense is left with providing information of times and occasions when law enforcement attempted to conceal evidence or falsify information in other contexts in this case. Number 35, Franks 1 and 2 provided multiple examples of law enforcement concealing or attempting to conceal evidence and of law enforcement not telling the truth under oath, all backed up with exhibits that support those contentions. Number 36. In Section 3 of the September 18th Franks Memorandum, the defense provided irrefutable evidence that Liggett provided false information in his affidavit concerning the words that Sarah Carbow spoke face-to-face with Tony Liggett in 2017 when describing a man she saw on the road just before 4 p.m. Liggett told Judge Diener that the man Carbow observed was the same man that Betsy Blair observed on the Monon High Bridge approximately 2 hours earlier. The problem was that what Carbow told Liggett in 2017 concerning this man's description was not the same as Betsy Blair's description, so Liggett did not tell the truth. 33. Liggett then misrepresented Carbow's words so that they were consistent with Blair's description, and then, for good measure, added that Carbow observed BLOOD on the man walking on the road when that is not what she told Liggett to his face in 2017. Again, Liggett did not tell the truth. She said he was wet and muddy, not BLODY. So, her statement was, yeah, he made up false words from an eyewitness, to meet his narrative. So number 38, the defense would ask that the court reread Section 3 in its entirety and also to review the attached exhibits to the September 18th Franks memo that provide the absolute proof that Liggett misrepresented Carbow's words. Number 39, the defense would ask the court to reread Section 3 in its entirety and also to review the attached exhibits that provide evidence that Liggett omitted crucial information concerning Betsy Blair's description of the man she observed from only 50 feet away on the High Bridge, as well as to the description of the vehicle found at the CPS lot after she left the trail that does not match any of Richard Allen's vehicles. They said it was a smart car. They said it was something else I can't remember. And Richard Allen has a black Ford Focus or something. All right. Number 40, the defense would ask the court to reread the rest of the Franks 1 and 2 in order to gain perspective on the many instances of law enforcement not telling the truth or attempting to conceal evidence and the truth. And that's where I think Judge Gull has an issue with all of this, because she doesn't want to hear that law enforcement or anything on her end of the law would do anything wrong. So that's kind of what I think, why she is fighting this so much. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Why does she really hate these guys, it seems? All right, so number 41. The third Franks notice provides additional evidence of omitted information of which Judge Diener should have been advised concerning 3 phones shown to be moving in and around the crime scene at a time when law enforcement would state that the unalivings were actually being committed. Number 42, this Franks notice provides additional evidence that Sergeant Holman's sworn deposition testimony was false concerning the findings of the Purdue professor, as Turco's own words confirm in a September 19th interview. So remember, the Franks notice came out, the very first one came out September 18th. The very next day, Holman tracks down Turco and interviews him so that he has some kind of record of the interview. Because they were called out for not giving for not giving them the professor's name or contact information so that they could do their own looking into it. All right, so number 43. This third Frank's notice provides additional evidence of law enforcement's intentionality of concealing evidence, as Sergeant Holman's September 22nd report attempted to conceal the actual words of Jeffrey Turco. Again, Sergeant Holman had sworn under oath that Turco did not find Odinism or cults as being involved in the unalivings, but Turco's own words show that Holman's testimony is false. It was in Holman's best interest, therefore, to omit or water down much of Turco's own words in his report, which is exactly what Holman did. Number 44, the defense is asking, based upon this third Frank's notice as well as the other Frank's notices, to set this matter for a Frank's hearing. We're asking you for a third-time judge. There is plenty of evidence that we have presented here which would show we deserve a Frank's hearing, to argue that all the fruits of the search of Richard Allen's home must be suppressed. So that's what this Frank's is about. Everything that they're fighting to get this search warrant for Richard Allen's home thrown out because it was done unfairly, illegally. Excuse me. It violated his rights, and so they're saying all of that, anything that came out of that search, the fruit of the poisonous tree, it's like anything that comes out of that search, it's all poison. It's all been tainted now because of the way that they got it. They already lied just to get the search warrant, and they omitted other facts. Number 44, the defense is asking, I read that one, sorry. Number 45, additionally, the defense requests that on this serious matters raised in Frank's 1, 2, and 3, as well as the exhibits that back up those matters, the court issues findings of facts and conclusions of law as to how and why the court ruled in whatever matter it rules on the defense request. So they are asking for, give us your legal reasons why you're concluding yay or nay on the Frank's hearing. Like, we've asked you 3 times now. You've denied it without a hearing multiple times and not given us reason. So there's the Frank's memo number 3. Now we're going to backtrack and go to Frank's memo number 2. And I apologize, it is blurry. It's very blurry on my end too. I'm having a hard time reading it. But we're going to get through. It's like an image, so it got blurry somehow from somebody else who uploaded it to Reddit. But I appreciate that they did, and even though it's blurry, we're still going to get through it. So, the defendant's additional Frank's notice. This is, again, Frank's notice number 2. So we read 3 because that just came out, so I wanted to make sure that you guys had the most current information. If you want to hear the second Frank's motion, stick around and we'll go through it right now. So the defendant's additional Frank's notice. Come now, the accused, Richard Allen, by and through counsel Andrew Baldwin and Brad Rosie, and files the following additional information to supplement the Frank's notice and memorandum previously filed with this court on October 18th. In support of said notice, the defense states the following. Number 1, that on September 18th, 2023, the defense filed its motion for Frank's hearing as well as a memorandum in support of said motion. And we read that. Well, we didn't read the memorandum, but we read the Frank's memo, which was 136 pages long. Number 2, that since filing that motion, the defense has received new discovery that strongly supports the defense belief that Tony Liggett and Unified Command attempted to conceal from Judge Diener and has since even attempted to hide from the defense that evidence supports that those practicing Odinism were the unalivers of Abby and Libby. So it was a big piece of the puzzle. Like I said, that's your whole shift in how you investigate. Do you go Odinist or do you go non-Odinist? I mean, it's really a huge deal breaker on who's getting charged here. So number 3. Specifically, Tony Liggett swore under oath at his August 8th, 2023 deposition that a Purdue professor did not believe that the sticks found on Abby and Libby's bodies were consistent of runes. Number 4. Furthermore, Sergeant Jerry Holman swore under oath at his August 10th, 2023 deposition that a Purdue professor said that the sticks found on the girls did not represent Odinism or any type of cult worshiping. Number 5, because of the findings of this Purdue professor, the Unified Command claimed to have essentially abandoned the Odinism aspect of the investigation into the unalivings of Abby and Libby. And that's what I said. Your whole investigation shifts. Do you do Odinist or do you not do Odinist? Angle. Like, which way do we go here? So, in response to the defense request to depose this Purdue professor on September 6th, 2023, the prosecutor Nick McClelland told the defense via email, quote, "As stated before, we are trying to identify the Purdue professor, but no luck yet." So Nick McClelland is in on this. Detective Holman has reached out to the FBI and Purdue and has not gotten a response. We will continue our endeavors, but may not be able to identify him or her. And that's coming from the prosecutor. So the prosecutor works closely with law enforcement. They together can make or break a case for someone. Make or break how someone looks guilty or not, even if they didn't do it. All right, so number 7, however, on September 19th, 2023, the day after the Franks memorandum was filed, where it was revealed that the Purdue professor was missing, miraculously, Jerry Holman found the professor, whose name is Jeffrey Turco, and interviewed him. Right. Number 8, however, in the interview, Jerry Holman apologized to Turco for the 3 to 4 weeks that it took him, Holman, to sit down and talk with Turco. Interesting. Number 9, the means that Holman was aware of the Purdue professor's identity since mid to late August, but nonetheless told Nick McClelland that Unified Command could not locate the Purdue professor, and furthermore that they may not ever be able to find the Purdue professor. Nick McClelland said that Unified Command may never be able to find the professor. However, after it was obvious that the Purdue professor would probably, quote, out himself as the missing Purdue professor following the Franks memorandum, Holman went and interviewed the Purdue professor the day after the Franks memorandum was filed. The day after. Covering your butt there, buddy. All right, so number 11. Why would Holman and the Unified Command try to hide the name of the Purdue professor, even risking ridicule for the absurdity that they could not remember his name? The answer is obvious once the taped statement was played. A. Dr. Turco stated that after reviewing the pattern of the sticks on the girls, that, quote, it was a given that someone was trying to replicate a Germanic runic script. Why is there so many hard syllables in that? All right, so letter B. Furthermore, Dr. Turco consulted with a colleague from Harvard who had even more knowledge on runes, and this Harvard professor was in agreement with Turco and his findings that it was Germanic runic script. Letter C. Furthermore, Dr. Turco stated that Odinism is an extreme neo-pagan, neo-heathenism ideology that has right-wing racist connotations. D. Furthermore, Dr. Turco stated that according to 19th century sources that Vikings practiced ritual killings and sacrifices. E. Furthermore, Dr. Turco stated that although he could not necessarily interpret these runes, that the stick configurations were pretty clearly runic, and that he, quote, could clearly imagine that this was somebody's idea, that when you do human sacrifice, you carve runes. There are some poetic sources that would sort of support that. Yeah, we read all that. Okay, so furthermore, Dr. Turco discussed how runes were thought to have magical significance and would be used in incantations and rituals, and that there is a sacrificial connection in mythological poetry. These were things, again, where somebody who was sort of an Odin fanboy would likely come across, Turco stated in his taped statement. All right, so number 12, that on September 8th, September 18th, September 21st, and September 27th of 2023, the state of Indiana made available to the defense a total of 14 hard drives, 5 flash drives, 3 disks, and what appears to be hundreds of pages of paperwork. Yikes. Particularly contained in the state of Indiana's September 27th evidence drop was a thumb drive that contained an interview of a Jeffrey Turco, not marked as a Purdue professor. So they tried to throw it in there in a September 27th data dump. So this is after the Franks memo, after they called them out, and after we're like, hey, we know that this is Odinist ties, and you guys have been lying to through your teeth about it. So give us what we want. So so that Frank's memo was the 18th, and then by the 27th, they throw in this thumb drive, as in this big data dump itself. So you really have to search for it and find it, and we're not going to label it anything that makes sense that you would be looking for. All right, so number 14. It seems apparent by the timing of evidence that Tony Liggett and Unified Command knew the Purdue professor's name and wanted to hide his name and his findings from the defense, as Turco's conclusions supported the defense and opposed the prosecution and Liggett's and Holman's sworn statements. So it would really prove that Liggett and Holman were not above board during their sworn testimony, their sworn statements. Therefore, apparently, in what seems like a complete harebrained scheme, Holman and Liggett decided to claim that they did not know the professor's name, hoping that this would put an end to the defense looking into the Purdue professor. However, once the memorandum made it clear that the Purdue professor would certainly be found at some point in time, it took Holman one day to locate Dr. Turco and interview him about his findings in 2017. Pretty strong evidence there, or pretty strong argument. Number 15. Again, Franks requires a preliminary finding that law enforcement has acted intentionally or with reckless disregard for the truth when being accused of concealing evidence from the judge who signed the warrant. It would be difficult to find a more outrageous set of facts to support that Liggett and the Unified Command intentionally concealed the Odinite information from Judge Diener. If Liggett and Unified Command were willing to try to get away with concealing a Purdue professor from defense counsel, then it is easy to see that they would have no problem concealing all the evidence detailed in the Franks memorandum from Judge Diener as well. Wherefore, defense counsel respectfully files this additional Franks notice and would request that the court factor in this new filing to rule in support of a Frank's hearing. That was submitted by Andrew Baldwin, again on October 3rd. So there we have gone through the third and second Frank's motions. We've already gone through the original Frank's motion. If you have not, I will also put that in my description below so that you can access the episodes from those, so you can follow along if you didn't get a chance to earlier, if you're just finding my channel now and didn't know that it was there. So I will link that and my geofencing video, whatever, you guys know what I'm saying. All right. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and don't forget to like and comment. Let me know what you think about these motions. Do you think that they stand a chance? Do you think Judge Gohl is going to deny again without a hearing? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Take care. Have a good one. If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeincourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.